Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. On the occasion of Engineers Day, I welcome you all. Today we have four distinguished speakers who have contributed their might towards the development of civil engineering, electrical engineering, telecommunication engineering, and software development. The first is Dr. Syed Shakibur Rahman, former principal, SJC Mysore. He will be talking on safe and secure buildings, issues, challenges, and good construction practices. I have also the honor of reading the profile of Dr. Syed Shakibur Rahman. Dr. Syed Shakibur Rahman has bachelor's degree from University of Mysore, MTech degree from IIT Madras, and PhD also from IIT Madras. He has a total of 44 years of teaching experience as lecturer, as assistant professor, professor, vice principal, and principal of Sri Jaya-Chamarajendra College of Engineering, a very reputed and top engineering college of India. He has held various administrative and academic positions also that range from Dean, Faculty of Engineering, Member Executive Council, Academic Councils, Estate Boards, Committee of Establishment of VTU Institute of Advanced Technologies, Committee of Drawing Implementation Plan for Establishment of VTU Institute of Advanced Technology at Muddenhalli and other regional centers. He is also a member of Standing Committee of Academic Senate, Equivalence Committee, Standing Committee, and a number of committees of Visvesvaraya Technological University. He was chairman of Malpractices Committee, chairman Research Registration Committee, chairman Board of Studies. Also, he held a number of academic and administrative posts. He was member panel of experts, that is for All India Council of Technical Education, New Delhi, that is for all over India. He was also member and chairman of Board of Studies in Civil Engineering of various engineering colleges in Karnataka. He was member council of KNS College of Engineering, Bangalore, PDA College of Engineering, Gulbarga, Global Academy, Bangalore, MSRIT, Bangalore. He was the research supervisor and guided 5 PhD candidates and also guided more than 50 MTech dissertations. Amongst the technical activities, he published more than 40 technical papers in national and international conference and journals. He chaired various technical sessions, conducted a number of short-term courses for working professionals, and also delivered technical lecture for consulting engineers all over Karnataka. I welcome him. The second speaker is an electrical engineer, Mr. Abdul Hafiz, who has occupied the post of Technical Director in Ristera Corporation, Canada. He will be speaking on global trends in substation technology. Mr. Abdul Hafiz is a master's engineer in power systems from NIE Mysore and worked as lecturer for a very short period in a reputed college called RV College of Engineering, Bangalore. He joined Karnataka Electricity Board in September 1977 and worked in different power stations at Shivasamudram and Belgoda. He has submitted technical paper on dynamic stability studies to Osmania University, which was accepted. He worked as an electrical engineer for 3 years in Saudi Arabia, and then before moving to Algeria as industrial design engineer till 1988. He worked in Saudi Electricity Company for 21 years and retired as engineer specialist in power distribution. He migrated to Canada in the year 2000 from 2015 until 2019 and worked as a technical director in Ristera Corporation in Calgary, Canada. Currently, he is doing online consultancy services for a company in Saudi Arabia. He has been very active in social activities. I welcome Mr. Abdul Hafiz, ME. The third speaker is a senior officer of Indian Telecommunication Service. He will be talking on Internet in India, National Optical Fiber Network and Cyber Security Technologies. Mr. Ali Ehtesham is currently occupying the post of Senior General Manager, Bharat Broadband Network Limited in Darbhanga. He did his electronics engineering from Aligarh Muslim University in 1996, and he worked as a lecturer in electronics and communication engineering department in Jamia Millia for about 2 years. He worked as VLSI design engineer in Semiconductor Complex Limited, Mohali, Chandigarh for a year. He joined ITS in 1999 through engineering services examination conducted by Union Public Service Commission. He served in BSNL in various capacities in Bangalore, Mysore, Kolkata, and Ranchi. Presently, he is on deputation to Bharat Brand Network Limited, posted as General Manager, Dhanbad. He is looking after the works of BharatNet in the state of Jharkhand. The fourth lecturer is an young entrepreneur, Mr. Nazir Ahmad. He is CEO of Nexus Info, a software company which is headquartered in Bangalore. He will be talking on leverage technology to reach and teach every child through software programs. Mr. Nazir Ahmad is CEO Nexus Info Private Limited, running a multinational software company having a head office in Bangalore. He is also associated with AMP for last 5 years. He served as a secretary AMP Karnataka, developed software for educational institutes, managements, principals and teachers to accept emerging technologies for creating a safe and productive ecosystem for students, developed ERP solutions and virtual classes for online studies, which is very much popular nowadays due to pandemic situation. He is a social entrepreneur and activist. I welcome Mr. Nazir Ahmad. Welcome you all.
Make my lecture as simple as possible. Mainly I'll be concentrating. Let me tell you one thing. I am not going to speak anything which all of us. I mean, all of us have the knowledge of what I'm going to speak. It is not that we do not know what I'm going to speak. Only thing is, we sometimes plan and and sometimes we do not adhere to our own planning. Yeah, you may start with the slides. Hello. So, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I will start, first with concrete. Then I will pass on to, the reinforcement in the concrete. And then very briefly, I will also go through, load-bearing wall constructions. That is, our base-centric constructions. So, yeah. So I was just saying, we sometimes plan. Those who plan certainly do better than who do not plan. And most of the time, even though we plan, we do not stick to, our own planning. So friends, let me start with the concrete. See, generally, concrete is referred to as M15 grade of concrete, M20 grade of concrete, M25 grade of concrete, M30 grade of concrete, and so on. The grade of concrete can go even, beyond 100 grade. Okay. So I will be, mostly sticking on to my lecture for the normal grade of concrete we adopt in practice. Okay. And my lecture, is for the constructions which may not have a quality, supervisor. Okay. It can be, our own buildings where we may not have a technical supervisor to supervise the construction of our buildings. In such a case, what, precautions we should be taking so that, finally we end up with a quality construction, without or with minimum, problems later on during its service period. Friends, we refer to, as I said, say a M15 grade of concrete, M20 grade of concrete, etc. And then we also say it is 1:2:4 concrete, 1:1.5:3 concrete. So that means, we adhere to what is 1:4 concrete. It is 1 part of cement to 2 parts of sand to 4 parts of jelly, which refers to M15 grade of concrete. This M15 grade of concrete was, considered as a structural concrete up to, 2000, the year 2000, when IS 456/1976 was revised in 2000. When it was revised, M15 grade of concrete was scrapped and they made M20 grade of concrete as the minimum grade of structural concrete. So what is this M20 grade of concrete? We generally refer to as 1:1.5:3 by volumetric batching. In fact, a good practice is to go for a design mix, with a wave batcher. But hello? Yeah, in our 90 to 95% of our construction, we do not go for wave batching, we go for volumetric batching. It's fine. There is absolutely no problem. We can, still go, by volumetric batching. So now when I say that M20 grade of concrete is 1:1.5:3, I am only specifying the ingredients: 1 cement, 1.5, sand, and 3 parts of coarse aggregate, that is jelly. But I want to emphasize here at this point of time that these are not the only 3 ingredients, going into concrete. There is, another 4th very important, underline 4th very important ingredient, which is water. Now, in our, proportions, we have just not bothered to mention about how much quantity of water should be going in mixing of the concrete. Okay, so 1.5, 3 when we say, then the amount of water is not generally, expressed. The quantity of water that has to go into concrete plays a very significant role. More the water than required, the strength ultimately will be less. Then the concrete can lead to a very porous concrete, where the pores will be left without getting filled up on its own. And therefore, I want to explain the importance of water, the quantity of water, which should be mixed with concrete. Now, for that matter, there is a term, what we call it as water cement ratio, W/C ratio. What is this water cement ratio? Water cement ratio is the amount of water, with respect to the amount of cement. For example, for one bag of cement, which generally weighs 50 kg, if you mix 25 kg or 25 liters of water, with one bag of cement in making of concrete, then the water cement ratio is 0.5. If the water cement ratio is 0.4, that means, it is 20 liters of water that is going, into concrete per bag of cement. So this water cement ratio is very, very important from the point of view that as the age of concrete, goes up, the hardening process of concrete starts. And the coefficient of permeability depends upon the quantity of water that has gone into making of concrete. That means when concrete is mixed, placed, compacted, and hardened, then, the concrete should not have pores. For example, when will concrete not have pores? You see, any concrete will initially have pores in its, fresh state. So if the water cement ratio is being limited to 0.4, then the capillary pores in the concrete will get filled up within about 3 days, which is very fine. Up to 0.45 water cement ratio, it takes about 7 days. Up to 0.5 water cement ratio, it takes about 14 days. 0.55 water cement ratio, it takes 3 months. I will stop there. See, if it is 0.6, that means 30 liters of water going into, one bag of cement, it takes almost 6 months for the capillary pores to get filled up. And, if by chance, if the amount of water that is going into making of concrete, is 35 liters for bag of cement, it may take over a year, and, sometimes it may not, the pores may not get filled up at all. This is what we should not be doing. Therefore, the quantity of water that we should be using should be, very proportionate, and it should be, properly designed. Friends, I will now take you through the stages of making concrete. First of all, we have to, decide about how much, the ingredients, the various ingredients, in what proportion the ingredient should be, what should be the quantity of water to be added. And then it should be properly mixed. Okay, the concrete should be properly mixed. Now, see, this amount of water and the, time, you may go to the next slide, please. Yeah, here, is what I am showing. The amount of water that goes into the concrete and the, time, up to which our, the concrete mixing drum should keep rotating, for how many seconds it should be kept rotating, after the last part of the ingredient has gone into the drum. See, we generally used Bondleys in volumetric batching. Okay, so after the last Bondley of the, material has been, put into the drum should rotate for a certain minimum time. For the same ingredients, if this mixing time is not properly maintained, then, we can see the variations in the grade of concrete. See, for example, here is the mixing, time in seconds. Say if we mix for about, 100 seconds, say 1.5 minutes, 90 to 100 seconds, after the last part of the ingredient has gone into the mixer, then we get a very consistent and good quality concrete, a consistent quality of concrete. Supposing, the drum is rotated only for about 30 to 50 seconds and then unloaded, then, in the same bulk of concrete, we may have some parts showing very high strength concrete and some parts very low strength concrete. That means the concrete we get is not consistent in strength. So this should be avoided, and therefore, as a thumb rule, I can say that after the last part of, your ingredient has gone into the drum, you should see that the drum keeps rotating for about, 1 to 1.5 minutes. Very simple thing, which, we should insist on doing. So friends, I told you, how important the quantity of water is in making of concrete. Now the unfortunate part, I will ask you one simple question. You say the quantity of water and the time, for which the drum is allowed to rotate is in whose hands? Where is the technical support? 1 second. So the mixing time, yeah, I was asking you one simple question. Who controls the quantity of water and, the time for which the drum should be allowed to rotate? Unfortunately, the boss there is the person who will be operating, the mixer. Yeah. So, it is left to his whims and fancies. Okay. Sometimes, they will be so arrogant. If you tell them, no, this is what I want, he will say, sir, this is not your only site I am working. I have worked, in more than 100 sites, and this is what I practice. So friends, we should be very strict in insisting on these two simple things, the quantity of water and the time which should be allowed, for mixing, after the last ingredient has gone in. These are, some of the points. We, all of us know that water is added. We all of us know that, it has to be mixed in a drum, okay, and all that. But, these are the key things, which we should remember, while, executing the work on site. So the graph shows the importance. Now there are three steps involved, sir. 3 to 4 steps. First, decide about the ingredients. Second, put the ingredients in the mixer and mix it properly. Third, unload. When we unload, we should see that the concrete is workable. What is workable concrete therefore? See, a concrete is workable when the concrete can be handled with ease in placing in its position and then compacting properly. These are, 2-3 main, things we should be observing. Concrete should not be harsh. Now, here is, where we get into a dilemma. I was telling in the beginning that we should limit the quantity of water. Now I am also saying, that our concrete should be workable. If I say that, per bag of cement, use only 25 liters of water, you may adopt it, but you may finally end up with, not getting a workable concrete. A workable concrete should be, transported with ease, placed with ease, and compacted with ease. Okay. And if we do not get a workable concrete, and if our concrete is harsh, then we cannot compact the concrete properly, and improper compaction, I will show how it affects our serviceability conditions. So therefore, here is one point which I want to insist. What is important in, getting a workable concrete? We have to get a workable concrete. There is no other question. But can we add more and more water to get workable concrete? The answer is no. We have to limit our quantity of water. Therefore, limiting the quantity of water and also getting, a workable concrete, we have certain chemicals which we should be using on site. And the chemicals are, called as the plasticizers. And, these plasticizers are now available in market. Okay. And adding plasticizer, let me tell you, it is not going to cost you considerable. Compared to the quality of concrete we get by limiting the water and getting a workable concrete at the same time by adding plasticizer is nothing. They are peanuts. The additional cost is peanuts. For example, for 1 meter cube of concrete, we may have to add plasticizer, which may cost about 100 rupees more. For example, if we have civil engineers and civil contractors, they will understand when I say that when you incur a expenditure of about 3,500 to 4,000 rupees per meter cube of concrete, spending another 100 rupees per meter cube of concrete to get a quality concrete, in my opinion, is nothing. Therefore, we should go for plasticizers if need be, so that we get a workable concrete which can be placed with ease and which can be compacted with ease. Next slide, please. Yeah, see, this is what I wanted to show you. See, if the concrete is not workable and if we cannot, compact fully, then see, for example, here, the density ratio. You see, why we should compact the concrete? Finally, to get a very dense concrete, So if the ratio is 100, then we get, the 100% of the desired strength. If the compaction is even less, to an extent of 0.95 or less by 5%, there is, decrease in strength by almost 30%. Therefore, importance should be given for compaction, and compaction is possible only when the concrete is workable. And whatever may be the case, when we are mixing the concrete in its green state, we should have a, workable concrete. Next slide, please. Yeah. So once, we place the concrete, here I want to tell you one thing. See, when you are placing the concrete, remember there is already reinforcement placed in position. And before placing the concrete, you should make sure that there is proper cover below the steel for the concrete to go and sit. I will be showing you in my next slides what will happen if you do not, maintain a proper cover. Cover should be proper. There are values. For example, in a slab, we should have a minimum of 3/4 inch cover. In columns and beams, we should have a minimum of 1 inch cover, and so on. This cover should be properly maintained. And the concrete that should be going in the cover should be very, very dense. I'm going to explain to you in my next few slides, what happens if we do not have a good, dense concrete cover below the reinforcement. So this, after taking care, we lay the concrete, we leave the concrete, to set. And now the question is, when should we start curing our concrete? This is, a very important, question. And I will simply say there is, nothing like a thumb rule for you to say that you start, curing now. You should, after lay the concrete, you should be observing. And, as you see the concrete, becoming dry, you should start sprinkling of water. You have to sprinkle the water on concrete. Don't put water and, create ponds there. You have to start at least, sprinkling the concrete. Now I want to ask you one thing. See, what do we understand actually by curing? See, curing means, the quantity of water that has gone into making of concrete, which is now designed and mixed, that quantity of water before the concrete gets set should not get evaporated. Therefore, by sprinkling water, we are maintaining a certain humidity and the conditions such that the water that has gone into the concrete, will not get evaporated. So friends, this is what curing, should mean to us. So now, then we start curing. Then the question is, for how many minimum number of days we should cure? You see, from the graph we see that even if we do not cure the concrete at all, just the concrete after being laid is allowed to set, with continuously in air, then say we get a certain, we end up with certain, strength of concrete. The same concrete, if we cure for 7 days, we get, 50% strength. Supposing we have designed the concrete for, say, M40, continuously in here, we may end up with about 15 Newton per millimeter square. If we cure it for 7 days, this 15 Newton millimeters per millimeter square will increase to 30 Newton per millimeter square. And if we cure it for 21 to 28 days, we get almost 95% of the desired strength. And another 5% will be there in reserve, and that will take, sufficient time, to get that 5% strength. So therefore, friends, this thing is, now the question, most of the time, I can say the frequently asked question, up to what time we should, cure by ponding water? Yes, the answer for that is ponding of water you should be doing for about 7 to 14 days. Now, supposing you are in a hurry to, start the construction above the floor, which has been laid fresh, then, you can remove the ponding of water. You can start with the construction of work, of the, subsequent floor, but care should be taken to keep the concrete moist. You can lay, gunny bags and, just keep the bags warm. It is all, the humid condition which, you should be creating so that the water inside the concrete will not get evaporated. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yes, I was telling you about the cover, the amount of cover, and also the quality of cover. I said, for slab, at least about 3/4 of inch cover should be there. For lintels, yes, another 3/4 of inch to 1 inch, cover should be there. For beams and columns, minimum cover should be 1 inch, and so on. And the quality of cover should be, sufficiently dense. Otherwise, what happens is what you see here. At this point of time, I always remember, our civil engineering group, some of our civil engineers and practicing engineers here who are present. I see Muhammad Amin. Yeah, I mean, some, will appreciate my point. I always remember one late, great engineer, Dr. C.S. Vishwanath. He used to tell, one thing. Maybe, if you permit me, I will tell that example in Urdu, which you will enjoy. यहाँ पर क्या है, एक एग्जाम्पल उन्होंने देते कि इंसान में और रीइंफोर्स्ड कंक्रीट में एक मेजर डिफरेंस ये है कि इंसान को हम बोलते हैं कि ये इंसान जिंदा है जब तक इसकी सांस चल रही है. इसकी आखिर सांस तक भी कोई इसको डेड बोल के डिक्लेयर नहीं कर सकता. मगर जब ये इंसान की सांस खत्म हो जाती है, रुक जाती है, तो ही इज डिक्लेयर्ड डेड. तो अब जब इंसान को डेड डिक्लेयर कर देते हैं तो हमारी प्रैक्टिस क्या है, जो भी करना है करते हैं, उसके बाद लेके जाके उसको दफन कर देते हैं. दफन करने का मतलब क्या, एक स्टैंडर्ड उसके भी ये है. दफन करने के बाद एक चीज तो एश्योर्ड है कि वो उसकी कुछ भी इससे जो है एटमॉस्फेयर पॉल्यूट नहीं होता. सही है. अब देखिए रीइंफोर्स्ड कंक्रीट में डिफरेंस. अब रीइंफोर्स्ड कंक्रीट क्या है, इट्स ए कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ टू मटेरियल्स, one is steel, one is concrete. We have been emphasizing on the importance of the quality of concrete and the cover. That means the depth of concrete below the reinforcement. I have been repeatedly telling you that there should be a minimum cover and it should be sufficiently dense. What do I mean by dense cover? A dense cover is something which will not allow the air to pass in and make the steel breathe. See, now for a person, we declared him dead the minute, his breath stopped. Now, in the same way, in the opposite way, the reinforcement will have to be declared dead the minute, it starts breathing. It will be alive as long as he is deeply buried into the concrete. We have to bury the concrete, we have to bury the reinforcement in the concrete initially so that that reinforcement will not breathe. The minute it starts breathing, it is declared dead. And once it is dead, then the dead thing, is going to create, a lot of problems. So that means once the reinforcement starts breathing, the process of, the reinforcement getting corroded starts. And once after a certain stage of corrosion, many problems in the structural element starts. For example, in the next picture you see here in the bottom and even in the top, what has happened? You see, maybe, we had provided cover, but the cover was not of good quality. It was not a dense cover and it was not sufficient. And therefore, what happens is, the, reinforcement was all the time breathing. And once it starts breathing, slowly, it starts getting corroded. There are stages, like in cancer, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. When corrosion reaches a stage of 4, then that's all, no correction can be made. Okay. And in the process, what happens is, the reinforcement, once it starts getting corroded, will expand. And when the reinforcement expands, it will push that cover, which is not dense and which is not sufficient in, quantity. Well, I mean, in the size, it will push and the, cover starts falling. Okay, and once that happens, this is what you see. And I am telling you, this is not uncommon, this is, quite common in our constructions. So friends, here again, I want to emphasize two things that, before placing the concrete on the reinforcement, we should ensure that the reinforcement, should be, with a cover. I will show you, some cover blocks. They are all available in market. They should be brought and, kept below the cover before the concrete is poured in. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, you see, these are all, some of the pictures. This is, the concrete, being spalled in the spalling of the covered concrete. This will happen if the, quality of cover concrete is not proper. Yeah, next. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in order to avoid that, first of all, our concrete should be a quality concrete. Number two, there's cover blocks for reinforcement are available in the market. So before we pour concrete, we should ensure that, the cover blocks are placed before the concrete and they are not disturbed. Friends, the main problem is this. Even, if there is a technical support on site, and if, our technical person visits the site a day before the concreting, he may be, totally satisfied and say that, yes, the reinforcement has been placed proper cover has been placed, etc., etc. But that is not enough. At the time of, casting the concrete, there will be a lot of movement, on the reinforcement, etc. And that, may disturb the cover which you have given. So therefore, extra care should be taken at the time of placing concrete to see that the cover blocks which were placed a day before the concrete remain in position during concrete. These are all, very simple things, we should only remember and adopt in practice. Yes, next slide, please. Yes. Now I am coming to the reinforcement. See, there is, a saying, I will just say, uh, it may not be, in fact, correct in many cases. See, there is a tendency in construction, to steal cement, but nobody steals the steel. You see, you got my point? You see, there is some tendency in, reducing the quantity of cement in, at the time of mixing and saving of cement, etc., etc. But, in general cases, I will say 90% of constructions, the steel what we normally provide will be more than the required quantity of steel if you go by design. And more than, the quantity of steel, what is important is the detailing part of steel. Okay, the detailing part, by detailing part, I refer to how steel should be placed before, it is embedded into the concrete. Okay, placing of, steel is referred to as detailing of steel. I will give you a simple example here. For example, we have the most simplest structural element in a building is a chhajja, which can be about 1.5 feet to 2 feet depth. Width. Now, how do we place reinforcement in a chhajja? You see, this is how we should be placing the reinforcement in a chhajja. For example, where is the reinforcement? The reinforcement is at the top and the concrete is below, and the quantity of the size of concrete above the reinforcement is, what we talked about, that is the cover. It can be 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch. And, if the slab thickness of the cantilever is about 4 inches, 3 inches of concrete is below the reinforcement. This is, if we adopt this kind of detailing, I assure you, there can never be any crack, which I will show you in the next slide. So friends, when we ask, when the site supervisor asks, neither the bar bender nor the head mason of that site work will agree to this point. And he will say, sir, if I provide reinforcement like this and put concrete, then the concrete below, there is nothing, for the concrete to hold, and therefore the concrete below there will fall. That is not true. This is how it should be. Say, for example, at the roof level, if there is a projection, then the reinforcement from the roof should get, projected, in the cantilever portion. Here is the cantilever portion. This is the reinforcement coming, from the slab portion. And then the reinforcement here, you see, is bent like this. What is this? From here to here, this length should be, what we call it as development length. Let us not bother about the technical term. I will tell you, this length should be a minimum of 50 to 60 times the diameter of the bar. If we are using, 8 mm.
ओ ये है उनका सके का लेक्चर चल रहा है
Yes.
Nasir.
Nasir.
बिल्कुल
Can I go ahead? Hello, can I go ahead?
A to Z.
Hello?
Yes, sir, you can go ahead.
Yeah. This, from the free end here, the length of the rod that should be, getting into the concrete, buried into the concrete, should be at least 50 to 60 times the diameter of the bar. So this is what we have to maintain, this is how we should be detailing our chhajjas.
Mr. Mobin, can you mute, please?
Ali.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
बाबा तुम्हारा मोबाइल का डब्बा कहाँ है?
Mr. Mobin, can you mute your microphone?
बड़ा मोबाइल का इसमें वायर नहीं मैं डालने से इसमें वायर रख लो.
Yes.
Please continue, Dr. Saab. Dr. Saab.
Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, sir. There's an option that you can mute all the participants, and then you can proceed. It's
Yeah.
better, I think, because there's a lot of disturbance.
Dr. Sayesh Shakibur Sahib, please
Yes. Yes.
continue.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have muted all the participants, but
Yeah.
they are unmuting themselves.
Okay, good. Yes. Now, you see, this is what I was telling. I was saying that if there is a cantilever portion, the reinforcement should be at the top, and concrete should be at the bottom. On the other hand, if you do not do this, then you see the kind of a crack shown here at the free end of the cantilever. I mean, at the fixed end of the cantilever. Here you see this crack. At the fixed end of the cantilever, it is bound to crack if the reinforcement is not at the top. It is very simple. Consider this as the cantilever. Now, when there are loads coming on the cantilever, it bends like this. Now, when it bends like this, tell me where is the tension and where is the compression? The tension is at the top, and therefore the reinforcement should always be to cater to the tension, and therefore it should be at the top. On the other side, if it is, by mistake laid at the bottom, this tension, will be in concrete portion. Concrete is weak in tension, and therefore the concrete cracks here. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yes. Friends, now, earlier, about 10, 15 years back, we used to get only one, grade of, steel in the market. Now it is very common. We have, Fe40, that means 40 grade of steel, 50 grade of steel, and also 55 grade of steel. We must be aware that, there are different grades of steel available in the market. Here, my point is, whatever grade of steel you have used in the beginning, you should, continue to use the same grade of steel till, that structural part, that structural element is completed. For example, if there are a few columns, if the columns were started with a M40 grade of steel, then complete the building only with M40 grade of steel. If there is extension of building, you can change the grade of steel. There is no problem. But in one particular structural element, it is not a good practice to mix different grades of steel. Okay. Now, for example, sometimes, some simple thing also. You should not think that, oh, well, main reinforcement, I can go for a higher grade of steel, and, the minor reinforcement in the form of stirrups, etc., can be, a lower grade of steel. No, don't do that also. In one element, the grade of steel should be the same. Now, for that matter, let me tell you now, now earlier, about 10 years back, there used to be a lot of price difference between a Fe40 grade of steel and Fe50 grade of steel. Now the difference is not there. Maybe a time will come in future very soon when you will find only, Fe50 and Fe55 grade of steel in market. There may not be any Fe40 grade of steel. Now, at the moment, the price difference between a 40 grade of steel and 50 grade of steel is not appreciable. And therefore, if you so desire, you can always go for a higher grade of steel. And by adopting higher grade of steel, there is saving in the cost of steel to an extent of 10 to 15%, depending upon whether your member is a flexural member or a compression member. Yes, next slide, please. Yes, see another, important aspect. I told you in the beginning, I'm not going to show you anything which we are not, practicing. Sometimes, sometimes we forget to practice. Sometimes we forget to practice. Okay, you should always remember. See, at the roof level, there is a beam column junction. There is a column, there is a beam, there is a slab. Okay, and the column rods will have to come. And the column rod should not be stopped at the roof level. It should go above that roof if there is further extension of the building. And the rods, as far as possible, should be staggered. They should not be of the same length, which extends above. Now, if this is not done, by any chance, if all the rods are cut, they are all above the roof level, but they are all cut at the same level, then, it is not a very big issue. What you should be doing is, in such a case, you will be placing that stirrup at a distance of, say, about 8 inches center to center. On the other hand, if above the junction, just above the junction, if all the rods are cut at the same level, then you reduce the spacing of those stirrups, these stirrups, to 1/2. If this is done, if the spacing is 8 inches, if this is not done, this is not a good practice, but still you have done it, then reduce, the spacing of the stirrups to 1/2, that is 4 inches center to center. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yes. See, these beam column junctions, they are very important. They are very important. As I told you, number one, you should not stop, the bars to get cut at, the roof level. By doing so, what will happen? You will have to start lapping the bars from the junction. Now, if you do so, there will be, lot of congestion of steel there, and, you cannot pour concrete and compact that concrete properly. See the importance, I will be taking through the importance of, a good quality concrete and proper, detailing at the junctions, particularly when there are, some heavy wind loads or earthquake loads. During wind loads and earthquake loads, generally the structure fails at, joints like this. Therefore, a joint should be properly, detailed before, concrete is poured. And next slide, I will show you. So here, what I want to say is, when you are projecting your bars, see that the bars, in one particular story will not stop at the beam column junction. They should go above the beam column junction for a minimum length of 50 times the diameter of the bar, so that, for the next, story, the rods will be lapped within that development length, which is 50 times to 60 times the diameter. Or even, you can project those rods for about half the height of the story or whatever. Yes. Now, sometimes, in multi-story buildings, we will have to change the size of the column, because, for a 5-story, 6-story, 8-story buildings, maybe first 2-3 stories, we may maintain a certain size of the column. And because as we go above, as the load, considerably get reduced, then sometimes we may think of, reducing the column size, or it can be for some other practical purpose also. that is permitted. You see, the column size in one floor can be something, and in another floor or subsequent floors, the column size can be reduced. It is permitted by code. By codal practice, it is permitted. But when you intend to do that, you should have a plan. What is that plan you should have? You have a certain size of the column below. You have decided about a certain other size above. Therefore, for this size, you cut the stirrups for that particular size of the column, and then have them. Then for the reduced column size, you reduce the size of the stirrups, keep it ready, and then from the bottom of this beam column junction or the slab level, you should king the bar from the bottom of the slab gradually and take above, and then place the stirrups and place the rods in position, and then only concrete this beam column junction and the slab. So friends, this is very, very important, so that the column alignment is kept properly, the reinforcement is buried into properly before the concreting is done. But sometimes in practice, it also we find that we may take a decision after the casting of a particular slab, particular story slab, to reduce the size of the column above. Then what we do, abruptly we king the rods. That should not be done. If we do that, then there will be a problem with the transfer of load from the above story to the story below. So this is the right practice. Okay, that means we should have planned before casting of the slab about what should be the size of our column above the slab, rather than taking a decision after the slab has been cast. Next. This is more serious a case where, after thinking, a part of the reinforcement is exposed. No, this is how it should be. Yeah. Next. Yes, I was telling you that, due to lateral loads, whenever there is a lateral load, maybe due to wind, maybe due to earthquake or whatever, your beam column junction plays a very important role. See, we have seen some pictures after failure of structures. For example, in 2001 or so, which some slides I'm going to show you also. There was a very serious earthquake in Gujarat, and so many multi-storied buildings, collapsed and all that. We found that, buildings which were properly detailed, not necessarily with excess reinforcement, see, the buildings which were designed with excessive reinforcement than required, but with improper detailing, failed. But buildings with, just sufficient reinforcement, but perfectly detailed after the earthquake did not fail. It sustained, that earthquake. It is because the joints there were perfectly designed, detailed. Now that, see, generally what happens is, the problem is, whether we want or not, our, the labor group, for example, mason. If you ask the mason, I want stirrups to be provided at the beam column junction, he'll put up a lot of resistance. He says, no, sir, I cannot provide. But, you have to make sure that, the reinforcement, the stirrups are continuous either in the column or in the beam. It can be continuous either in the column or in the beam. If there are no stirrups in the beam column junction like this, then there is no problem for the column as long as the loads are only vertically downwards. Only vertical loads, there is no problem. But there are lateral loads when, there are, very severe lateral loads due to very heavy wind or the earthquake, then, the first thing that fails in our buildings is the beam column junction. Therefore, it is to be noted that whenever there is a beam column junction, there should be stirrups tied either in the column or in the beam. It is easier rather to put, the stirrups in the column rather than putting in the stirrup. But we should not be, leaving the joint naked as it has been shown here. Yes, next slide. Yes. Again, this is also about, the discontinuity of the rods. Sometimes what happens, we take the building up to a certain number of stories, and then we stop the construction temporarily. And this temporary period can be for a few months, or it can be for a few years, or it can be a definite, indefinite period. Therefore, when we have to stop the construction for, whatever period of time, we should see that the rod exposed above the building are properly, placed in position. It is, common practice. We have seen that there will be dummy columns that will be constructed, to, keep the rod safe there. You should see that even that dummy column, will not, allow the water to go inside and make the reinforcement corroded. Or, so whatever we have to do, we have to, safeguard that reinforcement. If we leave the reinforcement just like that, particularly in the public buildings, say in Kalyan Mantaps or even in schools, where, children have access to go to the, roof slab there, they may play with the reinforcement, and the reinforcement sometimes may not be there at all. This is not, something uncommon. This is quite common. Okay. Supposing, there were 6 rods in the column and 2 are missing. Then what do you do? What do you do? Because you have already cast that slab. Okay. So for that, what we can do, is, make a small hole there and take the reinforcement from there. And then, we have adhesives and, keep this rod, which has been inserted now, completely buried into adhesives, and, it's safeguarded. Next. Next slide, please. Yes, next slide. Yeah, this is about, it is not about the column. It is, about a tension member, Now I told you, in our flexure members, the development length or the, overlapping length can be 50 to 60 times the diameter, which is called the development length. Now in a pure tension member, like this, the development length should be, 2 times the development length of what we use in the flexural members. Okay. So like that means, it should be double. If it is 50 diameter there, 50 times the diameter, it should be 100 times the diameter in a tension member. Otherwise, you can take 10 times the diameter of the bar and weld it properly, to secure the continuity of the bars. Yes, next slide, please. Yes. Now in our beam members, it is generally seen that for the size of the cross section of the beam, we may not be in a position to put, the complete reinforcement in a single layer of the beam. Then the code permits you to adopt multiple layers, like this, like what we are, showing here. So the first layer of reinforcement should be continuous. It should go and support over the columns or the wall, whatever it is. The second row can be curtailed, and the length of the bar in the second row can be 80% of the span. Subsequently, you can further curtail and put the third row of the bars. So when you are putting, the bars in different layers, they should be curtailed properly and, placed in position. It should not be, curtailed. All rods should be curtailed at one single point and then, place it like this. What will happen compared to this? in this case, there will be a stress concentration. There will be a stress concentration at the point where there is only, say, 30% reinforcement to the point where there is 100% reinforcement. In order to avoid that, you should stagger the bars and see that there is no stress concentration at a particular point. Next slide, please. Yes. Now I'll very briefly, with the permission of Farooq Amin Saab, can I take another 10 minutes? Yes, sir. I can't hear you. I will take it as I am permitted. Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir. Please continue.
Yeah. Yes. See this India Today slide I am showing you. This is after the Gujarat earthquake in 2001, isn't it? In 2001 or so. Yeah. This is what India Today said. Earthquake, he called it as deathquake. So what I want, from the next few slides, what I want to emphasize here is, we should have, even structures even in the event of a earthquake, to see that the loss of life is minimal. You cannot make any structure a earthquake-proof structure. We can only make earthquake-resistant structures. In the same year, I remember to have read one article which said a earthquake-resistant structure is one. See, this is very interesting. A earthquake-resistant structure is one which will allow the occupants of the building during an earthquake to rush out of the building to see how their building is crashing. See, that means the building you construct cannot be made earthquake proof. They should be made earthquake resistant. How do we do that? I was emphasizing on the point of how, you should be detailing your joints and all that. You should make by proper detailing, not necessarily by going for more steel. By properly detailing the steel, you have to make your building ductile. It should have sufficient ductility so that in the event of such, severe earthquakes or etc., it should have some time that should be allowed before the building fails, so that there is a warning to the occupants to rush out of the building. So it was a very interesting article which I had read then in 2001. I don't remember where I had read. It said earthquake resistant building is one which if allows the occupants to rush out of the building, go out of the building to see how their building is crashing. Yes, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, the damages to building are not related only to the magnitude of the shock, but more related to the quality construction. This is what I'm telling you. Okay. We should not give any excuses that, the building collapsed and so many people died because of, the high intensity of earthquake. No. We know beforehand we will be knowing which areas are prone to what, intensity of earthquake. Beforehand we have the information, and therefore when we design a building, we should take care and design the building for that particular region. Engineering can always minimize the structural damage so that the loss of life is reduced. This is what is called the earthquake resistant buildings. Next slide. Yeah, This is, you know, what happens in an earthquake. You know, there will be waves, you know, in the earth below the foundation. And, you know, these waves will create horizontal forces that will act on the buildings, and the building will have a side sway. And therefore, the buildings should, in an earthquake prone area, you know, earthquake zones. Zones have been divided: earthquake zone 2, earthquake zone 3, earthquake zone 4. We in Karnataka, you know, comes under earthquake zone 2. After that 1991 earthquake, 2001 earthquake, you know, zone 1 was simply scrapped. We started with zone 2. There is no zone 1 now. We have only zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, etc. So we are in zone 2, which is, you know, quite a safe zone. But whatever, you know, even, you know, in our zones, when we design a building, a multi-story building, we should design for, you know, considering the earthquake forces which come in zone 2. So this is what happens, in the event of an earthquake, due to the horizontal, you know, forces that will be induced in the earth, and you know, which can lead to collapse of the building or serious cracks in the building depending upon the intensity of the earthquake. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is what we are saying. Normally, structures are designed mainly to carry the weight of the building vertically down, but you know, during an earthquake, the vibrational energy traveling from the earth to the building can induce additional stresses, you know, to the earth. And, you know, it will be like, imagine a sheet of cloth. By shaking, you know, the sheet, normally that is what we do every morning after we get up from the bed, you know, to remove the wrinkles, we, you know, shake the sheet at one end. So by shaking, you know, the sheet at one end, a wave is formed. This is what happens to the ground in an earthquake, and this wave will transfer additional forces to the foundation of the building. Next. Yes. So now, maybe the last slide or so, I'm going to take you through a few guidelines, which again in 2001, you know, HUDCO had, you know, given these guidelines, okay, certain do's and don'ts for the house construction in seismic zones, What I want to emphasize, you know, with this slide is that there is nothing new, you know, which we are not following. Most of the things said there, all of us are following, you know, in our masonry structures, you know, in our constructions. But the point is, you know, we have to only ensure that they are properly, you know, done by our, you know, construction force, the construction team. You know, there is nothing new. I'm telling you, almost all the, you know, guidelines given there are adopted in our practice. Therefore, the point is, our masonry structures, what we are constructing today, with a little care, can be made earthquake resistant. Our masonry structures, I'm now not going through, you know, the multi-storied buildings or, you know, the detailing part of columns, beams, etc. Now here I'll take you through every point. You know, you can say, you can take it as a checklist and mark it if we are following. I'll tell you almost all the points we are following. There will be 1 or 2 points sometimes we may not be following. And if we follow henceforth, our masonry structures, what we construct, are all can be taken as earthquake resistant structures. Now, what we are saying here is, you know, in a building, you know, one part of the building, maybe, you know, the living room or the, you know, drawing hall, whatever we call, you know, can be a long, you know, portion. Here, what we are saying, the length of the wall should not exceed 6 meters, that is 20 feet. One of the dimensions of your hall or etc. should not exceed 6 meters. That means the single wall without a cross wall, a wall like this, without a cross wall in the perpendicular direction, that length of the wall should not be greater than, 6 meters. The height of any story should not exceed, 3.2 meters or so, which is not very clear for me in this slide. 3.2 meters or 3.3 meters. What is 3.2, 3.3 meters? 11 feet. Generally, our, height of any story is limited to a maximum of 10 feet in 90% of the construction. Sometimes we may go for 11 to 12. That means we are within that limit. Load bearing wall should not be less than 20 mm, 8 inches wall. All our walls used to be 13 inches. Now the minimum, thickness of the wall, if we are going for brick masonry, it is 9 inches. If we are going for block masonry, it is 8 inches. That means this point is also being followed. Cement and sand ratio should not be less than 1:6. And if we are going for a lime mortar, that is lime and sand ratio and cement lime sand, it should be 1:2:9. Okay. See, if it is cement and sand, it should be 1:6. Lime and sand 1:3, and cement, lime and sand, which is called a composite mortar, it should be in the ratio of 1:2:9. Next. The height of the parapet wall should be less than 3 times the thickness. Yes, sometimes, we may exceed a little. If we are using 8 inches thick wall, then he says, your parapet height should not be 24 inches. Sometimes, we may be going for about 30 inches. It's all right. Another important thing here, which is generally, missed out of our construction, is to provide corner T-junction buildings should be with 2 or more stories, with vertical reinforcement. If the number of stories are 2 or more, the corner joints should be with the vertical reinforcement. This is something, which we should be adhering to, which generally is not followed. And foundation should not be on the black soil. And if foundation should not be made on black soil, and if it is made, the depth of the soil should not be less than 1.2 meters. Generally, even if we find a, hard strata in, our normal soil, we'll be digging our foundation for about, 1.2 meters, which is about 4 feet. Now here, he is suggesting this for a black cotton soil. Okay. So that's also fine. Then separated, this is, one thing we should adhere to. Separated prefabricated element should not be used in roofs. You see, in earthquake, prone zones, it is better to avoid fabricated elements for the roofs. In flattened rocky earth, if the earth is a very rocky earth, the foundation, the depth of the foundation should be a minimum of 6 inches, 150 mm, 6 inches. So, if we have a doubt that, what is the 6 inches depth of foundation, is it sufficient or not, then, we can, tie that foundation to that rock by drilling some holes and, keeping some 20 mm or 25 mm rods. That means, lock your, building foundation with that rock. Yeah. I think I have come to the end of my lecture. This is the last slide, perhaps. Another important thing, sir, in a masonry structure, in a masonry building, do not go for cut lintels. Do not go for cut lintels. We must be going, for full lintels, continuous lintels. And it is all, what I am saying here is a band, and a band. That means provide reinforcement at the plinth level all through, provide reinforcement at the sill level all through, and provide reinforcement at the lintel level all through. So band, a band, and a band. With 3 bands, if you construct your masonry structure, masonry buildings, it can be sufficiently safe against even lateral loading. I think I have completed my lecture. Yeah. Any questions?
So the last one is for the load bearing.
Yeah, this last slide. No, before, thank you. I want to show you the last slide. Last slide, please.
Okay,
Sir,
fine.
I have one question. sir.
I'll take a minute or two. The previous slide. What is this? Will our masonry construction, once we construct, can we see this kind of, construction? Here, the only important point, see how the joints are broken. Now we have, one brick, the brick coming above that on either side, the joint is exactly, at the center of the brick. This is the ideal case. This, it may not be possible for us to adopt in practice, but, what I am saying is, to the extent possible, see that the joints are not over the joint. You see, this joint should not be over this joint, even closer to this joint. See, sometimes we see, cracks like this in the building, cracks like this in the building. Why that cracks? Those cracks will be exactly following this pattern. The joint, from one layer to the joint in the second layer to the joint in the third layer. That is how it is. The cracks will project. So in order to avoid, as far as possible, you see, this is the ideal case. I don't expect, to have, exactly a replica of this, in your construction, but you should make sure about 2 things here. This is what I wanted to emphasize, is the location of the joints. Number 2, see the size of the joint. See the size of the joint. The joint size, should be about 3/4 of an inch to a maximum of 1 inch. Don't go for, 2 big joints. And then the mortar that, you fill there should be a dense mortar. Don't, put some mortar and then put water to fill that joint. You should avoid this practice. Yeah. Yes, sir. I think I have finished my lecture. Any questions?
One question, sir.